The Val Emmons Show, where freedom is cool and political correctness is for sissies.
With me on the phone, I have Judge Jim Gray, who was the 2012 U.S. Vice Presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. Hello, Judge Gray. Welcome to this special edition of the Val Emmons Show.
Well, thank you. It's always nice to be with good people and share thoughts with people that are interested and caring, and I think that you fit those categories.
Well, thank you so much. So let's get started because I've got a lot of questions that I want to ask you. So I want to start with this one. The political climate, in our country and the state of politics, would you say that more and more people are looking to the Libertarian Party for an alternative to Democrats and conservatives?
The answer is absolutely. Finally, people are understanding that the Republicans and Democrats, and of course there are lots of good people in the parties, but basically the Republicans and Democrats are looking out for themselves and not for our country. There's polarization going on in Washington today and also all around the country in legislatures. They're not working for the United States. They're not working for us. They're working for themselves and getting reelected without addressing issues. So particularly young people are joining the libertarian movement in droves. I see this as a second American Revolution because what we're doing now with the two-party system flat out is not working, and it will only get worse. So the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, and, being as I try to keep myself unbiased, and, I just look at both parties without the without the goggles on, and I see them, and I'm like, what are you doing to our country? But so I wanted to move on because there's something that's very pressing here in Arkansas right now that actually has been going on. So in regards to the Libertarian platform, Section 2.4 of the new party platform handbook that I've been looking at, it states that the Libertarian Party support a balanced budget amendment, which I think most Americans do as well. However, I'd like to ask you, in support of the current Are you in support of the current Convention of States push by some of the special interest groups, along with, ALEC, AFP, Mark Levin, Hennedy, et cetera? Because I ask this right now because here in Arkansas we have many outside groups that are descending upon our state to help muster support for a resolution that was proposed this week for Arkansas to join the compact for an Article 5 Convention of States. And you might be interested to know that the representative who filed this legislation has also called the Libertarian Party a bunch of domestic enemies. And I'll read his quote. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Representative Nate Bell, but after Mitt Romney lost the election, and he put on his Facebook that I'm very tired of presidential politics, but there is one thing that needs to be said, and y'all know me. I'm not going to be quiet. The negative effects of Gary Johnson's efforts to suppress GOP turnout and his big lie that there was no difference between Romney and Obama directly and indirectly contributed to President Obama's reelection. President Obama will almost certainly appoint 1 to 2 Supreme Court justices in his second term. Those Supreme Court nominees will almost certainly do permanent damage to individual liberty and economic freedom. Gary Johnson and his followers' efforts to aid and abet the president's reelection qualify them as enemies of freedom, liberty, and the Constitution. I swore an oath to defend that Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will do so. So what is your take on, because this is concerning to us because not all of us agree with the Convention of the States as a way to get a balanced budget amendment.
Well, that's a lot of questions.
Right,
I did support Governor Gary Johnson. I called him the most qualified person to be president of the United States that I know of. And I guess, as I said, and it's not really humorous, I guess I said it a few too many times, so he asked me to be his running mate. So now what am I supposed to say? But I enthusiastically back him. And I think Governor Johnson was right. Obviously, it's a generalization that there's no particular difference between Romney and Obama. Romney did call attention to one thing that certainly was a difference, and that is whom he would have appointed to the United States Supreme Court. And I'm sure there's some others as well. Romney is much more in favor of the free enterprise system. Obama is almost totally against it. So there are differences. But it just highlights why Governor Gary Johnson should have been in those 3 presidential debates, because during those so-called debates, there was no dispute between Obama and Romney with so many things. The war in Afghanistan, the adventurism for our troops, Obamacare, and Romney was the architect of Obamacare. The war on drugs, the use of drones, all of those things. So Governor Johnson was completely correct with regard to that. Coming back to any changes in our Constitution, I do not favor a new constitutional convention because private select groups and interest groups would take it over, and who knows what we'd end up with. The United States Constitution is the very best document written by the hand of man in the history of man. So I don't want to tamper with that. With regard to putting in a balanced budget initiative or amendment, be careful what you wish for. I suppose we could be in wartime, that sort of things for emergencies. I believe that we should have responsibility in government. And I believe that if the government is not working, it's the fault of the people, the voters, because it's our government. And if it's not working, we have only ourselves to blame. And you didn't ask this, but all of this shutting down of the government by the Republicans because of the cap on the ceiling for borrowing. That's the wrong place to do it. The Congress are the people that vote on all these expenditures. That's where these votes should be done, not on shutting down the government because the Congress is so irresponsible that they continue to vote for more spending. So we just need to have this libertarian movement come into the fore, responsibility on finances and social acceptance, and the country will be so much better off, so much safer, and so much more prosperous. So that's where I come down on these things.
Okay, well, those great answers. I feel the same about the Convention of the States as well, and the other things that you spoke of. I couldn't put all of the questions in there.
Well, you had a few. We call that in my profession a compound question, but good for you.
Right.
Covering some ground.
Well, I have a lot of questions. There's a lot of stuff going on right now that people need to be aware of. I'm just trying to cram all this into this one interview with you. And as for the listeners, we'll have another interview after you're here next week for the
yes, and I'm looking forward to that. First of all, Arkansas is a beautiful state. People don't realize that as much as they should. And the people there, I've been to Fayetteville, I've been in Little Rock. It's a beautiful place. Looking forward to sharing time with you. And as I jokingly discussed with you before we're on the air, I'll bring good weather with me, so you don't need to worry about that.
Right, now, you're going to hold you to that.
Oh, absolutely, to the degree possible.
So I'm excited about this conference. It's going to be at the, let's go ahead and give this out for the listeners, at the Comfort Inn and Suites Hotel in downtown Little Rock. And it's going to kick off Friday evening, 6 p.m. to 10 o'clock with a meet and greet mixer. Meet the candidates, pre-registration with you, of course, Judge Jim Gray. And then Saturday, it goes from 8:30 starting registration all the way to 6:30 p.m. with a dinner and keynote speaker, which that is going to be you. And then Sunday morning, it goes on from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so there's lots of training sessions. There's lots of information about the Libertarian Party if you're new to the party and want more information. Great place to get started for that. So I want to move on, Judge Gray. Because I want to ask this because I was in D.C. this week for some meetings, and we had a lunch catered. And it was an hour late, and the delivery person, of course, was a manager, and she said that all the employees were on strike over minimum wage. And this was like just a deli, just at Union Station. So the Libertarian platform on property and contract reads, we oppose contracts on wages, prices, rents, profits, productions, and interest rates. So how do you feel about the executive order that Obama signed into law on Wednesday regarding minimum wage for federally contracted employees? I don't think you're going to agree with it, but I just thought I would ask and not assume, because these employees were not, the ones that were on strike, they were not federally contracted employees, but they were mad because they're not getting a minimum wage increase, but federal employees are.
I think that Obama's action is unconstitutional. He is taking legislative action and is doing it himself. He's not an imperial dictator, and he should be held accountable by the courts and by the Congress. And that would have been true regardless of the issue that we would be talking about. Beyond that, the minimum wage is really the wrong approach. It depends what you're trying to do. We all believe that people that work hard and put in a 40-hour week and are diligent should be able to support themselves and maybe even their families. But interfering with the marketplace like that is a dirty trick. I just heard, I was reading a book recently by Jim Powell talking about the folly of FDR, and he said that during the FDR period, people were concerned about women. Oh, women aren't getting the same amount of pay as men, which I certainly believe they should for equal work, but so we're going to have a minimum wage for women. And they did. They passed a minimum wage for women nationwide. And you know what happened? Well, all the women were fired and they hired men. You know, there are repercussions. There are unintended consequences of these things. You pass the minimum wage laws and the same thing occurs. You'll replace individual people by machines, or companies will go out of business, or they'll cut back. So, yes, just like in a union, if you are able to keep your job, then, you know, the extra $1 or $2 is fine. But a lot of people lose their jobs, particularly minorities, particularly people that have no education to speak of. They're the ones that get fired. So you're interfering with the marketplace unnecessarily here, and you're causing harm to almost as many people as you're helping. Not a good idea. The government should get out of the marketplace, and then jobs will increase, and we will be able to get that prosperity, getting on the first rung of the economic ladder. Because as we say, and it's absolutely verifiable, that, you know, we're keeping high school graduates or non-high school graduates from even getting on that first rung of the ladder. Then they can show that they're responsible. They can start doing their jobs well, and then, of course, they'll either get an increase in salary where they're working, or they'll find another job at an increase in salary. But now we're keeping that from occurring. So
right,
I do not favor minimum wages.
Because they become comfortable in their job, and if they're getting, you know, if they're getting what you would get if you worked in a factory, why would they go work in a factory? But it's interesting that you bring up unions, because yesterday I was reading an article in USA Today that a report of Volkswagen in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the employees actually voted to reject the union by a 712 to 626 margin. And so I was arguing with some folks about this on Facebook. Love to do that. But
well, it should be their choice.
Right, exactly, and that's what I was saying. And so do you believe that unions are becoming extinct? I mean, I think
unions have had an important point in history.
Exactly.
They talk about job security, you know, they talk about taking advantage of people, you know, getting restroom breaks and that sort of thing. And you can look at these bumper stickers, you've seen them, live better, work union. And again, it's true for those people that are able to hold their jobs and artificially, in a lot of ways, increase their amount of employment compensation. And you're seeing that enormously today with regard to federal or to government employees. Those are the unions that are really thriving and unnecessarily putting the costs or the pay of government workers above the private sector. So you see an elite class of workers today across the country who are working for government, and it's just not right. Here in California, I don't know about Arkansas, but we have something like 12 paid holidays a year for public employees. You know, we get Veterans Day, and you get Columbus Day, for heaven's sake, and Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez, and all these are paid holidays off work. Now, as a judge for 25 years, you know, thank you very much personally, but I'm against that. You know, my wife is a physical therapist. She has her own therapist. She has her own clinic. You know, of course, she gives the 4th of July and Thanksgiving and that sort of thing. But the answer is no. We have a privileged class caused by, in a lot of ways, the public employees unions, and it's simply wrong.
I completely agree with you. So another particular section that I read from above, Section 2.1, also states that of the Libertarian Party platform, it states that the Libertarian Party advocate the repeal of all laws banning or restricting the advertising of prices, products, or services. So some folks have a bit of trouble with this one. For example, when tobacco companies target, you know, our young adults with TV ads during primetime television. So could you elaborate a little bit more on that and explain?
Yes, I disagree with that. And in the law, we make distinctions. Words have different meanings. I do not favor, and I'll come back to exactly your point, but I do not favor the legalization of marijuana. Why? Well, the telephone I'm holding in my hand right now is a legalized product. You know, I can buy any brand name. I can. There's no age restrictions. The price is set by the free market. The shirt that I'm wearing, my UCLA sweatshirt, is a legalized product. You know, you can buy as many or as few as you want, and all that sort of stuff. I do not favor marijuana being a legalized product, just like I do not favor tobacco or alcohol being a legalized product. I don't want my 12-year-old daughter to be buying marijuana in a vending machine across from her junior high school, and I don't want it advertised. So it's a strictly regulated and controlled product, which is different. So I would have restrictions on advertising, just like you say, on alcohol, on cigarettes, and on marijuana when it's eventually regulated and controlled around the country, and we're very close to being done. So otherwise, as far as other products are concerned, I want the government out of it. I do believe that there should be free advertising of corn or of even genetically modified goods. They should be labeled, but they should be able to be advertised. So, except for that which I said, and the lottery, for heaven's sake, I felt that we should have a state-run lottery in the state of California when it passed, 15, 20 years ago. But now the state is pandering to the people that may not have had an inclination to buy lottery tickets by advertising it. And the answer is no. If people want to buy lottery tickets, they'll know by word of mouth exactly where to go and how to get them. But don't pander to these sorts of things. So I would not have advertising with regard to gambling either, but I certainly would allow free enterprise like Indian casinos, or you're in my casino. It's just a question of time. It would be zoning, but I would not allow those panderings to be advertised. So that's the only nicety, but I think it's an important one.
Right, okay. Well, that's a good clarification. And since you brought up the legalization of marijuana, I'm going to get to a question that I have. So we have to take your opinion out of that, because the problem now that we have with Washington and Colorado is that marijuana is still a Schedule I drug, along with cocaine. So when states have passed these laws, they're in direct conflict with the federal law, because the Department of Justice and the Obama administration is not doing anything to reschedule marijuana and allowing it to remain that Schedule I drug. So, I mean, there have been 9 former DEA directors that have sent a letter last year requesting action, including Arkansas gubernatorial candidate Asa Hutchinson, who was, the DEA director. And so nothing has occurred to change this. Why do you think that is? Regardless of our opinions on should it be illegal or not, it is legal in those 2 states, and it is in direct conflict with.
I have three responses. One is there are people in our world that still believe that marijuana is bad, is evil, it should be prohibited. And they're honest opinions, and I disagree with them completely, but they're entitled to their opinions. Number 2, it's money. We have enormous amounts of money that are being perpetuated, government money, legal money, spent on pursuing this failed and hopeless policy of drug prohibition. By the way, I was on the O'Reilly factor right after Asa Hutchinson had been confirmed as the head of the DEA, and I took him to task. He was on the show as well, and I got him to agree that it would be more appropriate for the Surgeon General, a medical doctor, to decide which schedule which drug should be on instead of a police officer, which of course was the head of the DEA. And he agreed that that would be more appropriate, of course never did anything about it. And the third reason is we're into hypocrisy here. Today, Marinol, which is a synthetic marijuana, is a Schedule III drug, and it can be prescribed by a medical doctor. Well, wait a minute. You can't have it both ways, federal government. Either there's medical benefits for marijuana or there isn't, because the natural plant is a Schedule I drug, which they say has no medicinal value whatsoever, which is absolutely flat-out wrong. And Marinol, the synthetic drug, can be prescribed. What's the difference? It's easy. It's money. Pharmaceutical companies cannot patent a plant, but they can patent the synthetic stuff. So they use their economic muscle to get Marinol be scheduled a Schedule III drug, while marijuana, which would be in competition, is a Schedule I drug. That is beyond hypocrisy, and it's something that we should not only laugh at, but we should be incensed about.
Good point. So since we're on healthcare, another issue that I wanted to ask you about, of course, is Obamacare. So how do you predict this is going to affect the labor markets even more than it already has? And why in the world are we allowing this president to make up his own laws as he goes along without adhering to the process set forth in the United States Constitution? What is it going to take for someone to step up and put a stop to this? I mean, conservatives tried Clinton on impeachment, for having an affair. But this president gets away with railroading Americans' rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, among other things. And no one does a thing to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute. Okay, well, they do, but that's all they do. Like, they don't take any real substantial action against him.
If the libertarians were to be able to show people and convince people, same thing with the Republicans, by the way, that they really care about those that cannot at the moment afford to take care of their medical issues, Obamacare would have simply disappeared from the face of the earth. Because Obamacare, or the so-called Affordable Care Act, on its face and into it, simply will fail, is failing. It will not work. But so many people continue to support it because they don't think that the ones who oppose Obamacare really care about them. And libertarians do. By the way, and I think this is an important distinction to make, you and I, as taxpayers, as citizens, have no legal obligation to help anyone in their health care whatsoever. We don't, but we will because we want to, because that's who we are. To the degree that if you were bleeding on the street, I have no legal obligation to help you unless I help cause your injury, but I will because I want to. And I was in the Peace Corps, for heaven's sake. I care about people. But what's the right way to do it? Here, I have two alternatives to this so-called Affordable Care Act. Number one is, if people cannot afford their insurance, then let's subsidize it. Subsidize it directly and give those people a voucher that is good for a certain amount of money per month or per year. They can take that voucher and purchase their health insurance on the open market. And then the free enterprise system will rally. If there's people with money out there, I assure you that market will be met. Or just put in, you can call it socialized medicine if you want to, but government health clinics.
That's
and
my idea.
People,
yes.
Well, it's called socialized medicine if you want to. I myself lived in a great socialistic medicine enterprise for 4 years. It's called the United States Navy. And, with I and my dependents needed it, we'd go to the Naval Clinic. My son was born on Guam at the Naval Hospital. It works pretty well. And so you have a copay of some form. If they can't afford that either, then that can be waived. But those are one of two options that will work and will bring back competition into the healthcare field. Now, I'm much older than most of you. I had my birthday yesterday, but I'm up there. But I remember living in the 50s and up to the middle 60s. Well, that's right. We call it in my family the birthday fortnight. So thank you. But, we had the best medical system in the world then, and it was not even a topic of conversation that we could not find reasonable health care for reasonable prices. It just wasn't even discussed. But then the federal government starts getting involved, first with LBJ and the Medicare and stuff, and then continuing ever more thereafter. And each time they mess it up, it gets worse. Each time they touch it, the system gets worse. And now medical doctors are leaving the field, so we're going to end up under this so-called Affordable Care Act, with 30 million Americans that have health care insurance that didn't have it before, but guess what? No one of any competence will accept it. So what good's that going to do them? Get the government out of this system, and it will return to excellence. Same thing with schools, same thing with methanol, all this sort of stuff. The government touches it and the government makes a mess of it. Libertarians will turn this around and bring back that prosperity, that equal opportunity, and that security, as well as liberty that we are now forfeiting on all fronts.
Yeah, I think that the concierge medicine concept, I'm not sure if you guys have that in California, but around here and in Texas and Oklahoma, there are all of these concierge surgery centers, medical clinics popping up where you pay like a membership fee and then a small copay. And I think that is
the
future, cutting out insurance companies, because since insurance companies, I know government as well, but since insurance companies have become more involved every year, over the course of since it started as fire protection. It didn't really.
Yes. And they're making lots of money.
Oh,
the middlemen, the insurance companies are making a lot of money. Look, put it graphically. Today there are two areas of health care that you or I or anyone listening can get good quality health care for reasonable competitive prices. What are they? Number one, LASIK eye surgery, and number two, cosmetic surgery. Why? Because the insurance companies and the government are not involved. So you hear these advertisements, come to Dr. Gray, I've done this LASIK surgery 20,000 times, I'm good at it, I'll give you a payment schedule. There's competition, and it works. Bring that competition back to, when you get the flu or you need penicillin or whatever else, get the government out of it, and medical doctors will practice their trade again and bring back the ingenuity and the dedication that is now simply forced out by government. It's really pretty straightforward once you see what's happening.
Yeah, to your point about doctors dropping out of the whole system altogether, I mean, we're going to have more insurance companies than we are doctors, so what good's that going to do us?
Oh, yeah. No, but, that's right. That's right. It's not a good thing to see, and it's completely unnecessary.
Right, and it's not health care. But another hot topic right now that you touched on a minute ago was education. So I want to ask you, it's a hot topic here in Arkansas as we have adopted the Common Core standards. So what are your thoughts on Common Core and then, of course, school choice?
I've talked to Governor Johnson, who was a magnificent candidate for president as a Libertarian in 2012. And I'm doing my best to encourage him to run again for president in 2016. And I'm also encouraging him to have one real issue, and that is education. Ask yourself the question, who is in a better position to decide where and how your children should be educated? You as the parent or the government? And the answer to that is easy. I've never had anyone say anything other than the parents are in a better position. So give the parents the ability to choose where and how their children will be educated. And you do that by giving them, figuratively, a piece of paper. You can call it a voucher, you can call it a scholarship, you can call it a coupon. I don't care what you call it. But they get to say where this, I don't know how much it would be per child. Say $8,000 per year, they can decide where this will be spent. And they can go to a local neighborhood school if the school is performing, or they can go to a private school. They can even go to a religious school or a vocational school, wherever they feel that their child would get the best education possible. And you know what? They will demand excellence. And if your school doesn't provide that excellence, they'll go to another neighborhood school that will. What's going to happen to your school? Well, you're going to start losing your customers and losing money. So you're going to say, well, what's that other school doing that I'm not doing? And you'll get better, to which I say, great, that's the idea. Or you'll go out of business because you're not performing, and some other entrepreneur will come in, buy your physical facility, and do better. It will bring back excellence to our schools, because today, as you know, and people around the country are seeing, many schools are failing our children, particularly in the lower economic areas. Look at New Orleans. Close by to you, New Orleans is adopting the school choice position, and it's starting to work. And then look at Milwaukee, where they've been doing this for something like 7 or 8 years. And actually, I was in Milwaukee in the campaign in 2012. And actually, I confess, I kind of forgot where I was, so I went through and was making these comments. And they looked at me and said, well, Judge Gray, yeah, we don't have any bad schools anymore. Milwaukee, the bad schools are gone because we have competition. It will work. This should be the issue in the 2016 campaign. It cuts across all boundaries, all economic levels, all levels completely. They all want their children to get a good education. And you can look at those Congress people in Washington. I'll bet none of them have their children going to the local schools. That is the statement, the local public schools, that is the statement beyond anything else. We must bring back that excellence, and we will.
I mean, it's for the future of our country. We must. You're exactly right.
Absolutely.
I have two teenagers, and I have struggled with the schools, and a lot of the thing is some of the teachers say you have no idea how bad Common Core is. Like, they won't say it on record to me, but they have, to other organizations that are trying to stop the Common Core standards. But it's failing our children. It's going to fail our children.
Well, it is. And, who will win under this system? Well, the children will win across the board, and also the better teachers, the good teachers. Today, teachers are not dumb. They see most of the money is in administration, so the better teachers in the government schools actually get out of the classroom and go into administration. But if you're in a private system, you'll be recognized for your talent in teaching. We'll have fewer administrators, more teachers, and if my school isn't paying a good teacher enough, you will lure that teacher away over to your school. Fewer encumbrances, greater pay, the good teachers will win. Who will lose? The poor teachers. Now, there are a lot of teachers that are not teaching well now because they've been beaten up by the system, and you're going to get paid the same and you can't be fired anyway, so they get lazy. They will again come back to excellence. But the poor teachers, okay, they'll lose their jobs, to which I say, fine, they shouldn't be teaching anyway. The poor teachers will get out of the system. The better teachers will thrive. Everyone will win. And by the way, there's one more thing, and that is there's an enormous inequity today in our world, because if you are caring about, like, your two teenagers, and you care about their education, which I know you do, and you can afford it, you will pay the tuition for them to go to a private school of some form. But the inequity is you continue to pay through your property taxes or taxes for the other schools that you're not using. That inequity would go away. There is not a problem with this except the intransigence of the present system.
Right. I mean, and even if you want, there's people out there that do better at homeschooling, but they still have to pay taxes for them to go, and they have to pay more money for them to homeschool. And I think that's absolutely outrageous and not fair. But my children actually go to a magnet school where their focus is music, and so it works out for them because all of the students that are there, their parents fought for them to be there. So it's not. And there's some
excellent government schools, and there's some excellent teachers out there, but again, the percentage is not nearly as high as it would be, and ask Milwaukee, ask New Orleans. We will bring excellence back uniformly to all students. And, not everybody wants to go into music or wants to be a psychiatrist. They want to learn how to aircraft mechanics or that sort of thing. If there's a demand for a vocational school, like in Germany, by the way, they lead the world in vocational schools, and they're competing really well, thank you very much, and these people get good jobs. So that's what will happen with choice, and that's where we need to go. And we will, under Governor Gary Johnson, encourage him to run for president again in 2016, the most qualified person that will be on the ballot.
Okay. And I completely agree. We're setting our kids up for failure when we send them out to the world without skills. They become tax takers instead of tax makers.
Yes.
Which is, anyway, a whole other story.
That's a good phrase. I hadn't really heard that before, but you're right.
Okay, so I want to switch gears here for a minute, and I want to talk about the NSA. Is the NSA infringing upon the Fourth Amendment individual rights of Americans? So, and how can we stop this intrusive government and still counter the threats of domestic terrorists? Your thoughts?
You told me I think before we were on the air, that you were pretty much a lifelong Democrat but never really gave it much thought. And once you did, you became a libertarian. I am the reverse. I was a lifelong Republican, didn't give it much thought, until the passage of the so-called Patriot Act, which really did me in. I could not be a part of any organization that would condone, much less assist, this direct frontal attack on our civil liberties. That was before I was even aware of what was going on with the NSA. This is enormously subversive. This is a direct threat to our way of life. And people, again, being a candidate, I've met so many folks that are immigrants to our country. They came over from the Soviet Union 20 years ago or whatever. They're now citizens. They loved America. They do anything to come, some even risk or money to come to our country, and now they mostly are looking just with despair at our country's government is becoming pretty much, in many ways, the same as that government they fled from the Soviet Union, from Cuba, that sort of thing. They look and they can't believe that good people here are allowing this to occur. You know, what Snowden showed with the NSA, it was frightening to us, and we should be standing up with alarm at these disclosures. You know, the idea that our bank records, our telephone conversations, all of that sort of thing, our email traffic, we need to get into a zone of informational privacy. I heard the dean of the law school at the University of California at Irvine yesterday in a talk, and he denoted that we do have an area which must be protected by the Constitution, and that is informational privacy. Our bank records should not be accessible by the government without a warrant based upon probable cause. We shouldn't have drones flying overhead surveilling Americans in public streets or private areas without a warrant attached with probable cause. They shouldn't put these devices on our cars to trace our movements, where they can even tell if your car is in your garage and the door is closed, but they'll be able to tell. But no, informational privacy is under attack by our very own government. And let me say one more thing about this, because I feel strongly about it. I do not blame the president for this. George W. Bush extended this power enormously. Obama has taken this and run with it even farther. But if you look at the responsibility for a president, the enormous responsibility to keep us safe during the president's watch is crushing. And so I don't blame them for trying to keep us safe. I do blame the courts, and I do blame Congress, because, again, what is the soul of our country? What people around the world still love America, and they love Americans. They're not all that wild about our government, but then again, a lot of times I'm not either. But they still would love to come to America. Why? Because of our soul, and our soul is our civil liberties and our freedoms, and our soul is under attack today by our very own government. And I hold the courts and I hold Congress directly responsible for that. Shame on them forever.
I'm in line with that. But I just wanted to clarify, currently I'm an independent, but my thoughts align more with the Libertarian Party as opposed to the GOP or the Democrats. And just because I'm a journalist and not running for office, I just kind of want to stay neutral. That way
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, my thoughts, everything that the Libertarian Party stands for is, my thoughts are right there in line with it. And that's what I meant when we were talking earlier, is a lot of people don't look.
Fair enough. I think if you are in the media or if you are in the military, you're certainly welcome to be a member of whatever party you want to, but it should be private, and I respect that. There's some people in the media that don't even vote for the same reason, and I guess it's the only reason I would accept for not voting, but maybe they're right.
No, I vote.
Yeah, I think people that don't vote, people that do not vote, give up their right to complain. That's flat out and simple.
I completely agree, and I complain a lot, so I have to have that.
You're entitled. There's a lot to complain about.
Oh, yes, I do. And so, back on the NSA, so do you think Snowden is a traitor or a hero? Because that's huge debate.
The answer is yes to both questions. Daniel Ellsberg, back in the Pentagon Papers, the 1967, actually it was later than that, with the Vietnam War, saw what was going on, saw that the government was lying to the people, to the media, about what we were doing in Vietnam, and as a matter of conscience, exposed those lies. And I think that was a heroic thing to do. But if you're going to be involved in any form of civil disobedience, you're a traitor unless you stand there and face the consequences. Daniel Ellsberg actually faced a trial, eventually, by the way, it's probably before your time, but the charges were dismissed because they found that the Nixon administration had actually burglarized his psychiatrist's office and taken his files, and when that happened, the motion to dismiss was granted, as well as should have been. But Ellsberg had the courage to stay here and face the consequences. So that made him a hero from my standpoint. Snowden did not. And by the way, Ellsberg's release of information was a lot more specific about what was going on. He didn't really, although they always say you compromise our security, but he really didn't. Snowden issued many too many things. He could have accomplished it by just simply showing that they're monitoring our cell phones and that sort of our calls. But he issued too much information that I think in some ways did compromise people who are working for our country, undercover or otherwise, and also too much information that did not need to be released about, the private conversations between diplomats among countries and our people's feelings about, this person's a flake and that person isn't, that sort of thing. So that was unnecessary. And then he fled to Russia. So I think he should be prosecuted. I do not think he's at all a hero for that because he didn't have the courage to face the consequences. So the answer, once again, to summarize, is yes to both questions.
Well, that's fair enough. But wasn't Ellsberg a journalist?
I don't think so. No, he gave the information to numbers of journalists, but he worked for the NSA basically on contract, I believe.
Okay. But now, do you believe that it's the right thing that we've done is to spy, now that we know this information, regardless of if he's prosecuted or whatever, do you believe that we should be spying on our allies? Do you not think that is like cheating in certain circumstances?
Oh, come
when
now.
It's not
every government that's ever lived has spied on every other government that ever lived, be them enemies or allies or brothers or sisters. So it's naive to say that we shouldn't be spying on other countries. And that, Israel has spied on the United States, and the United States has spied on, we're close allies. We're as close as can be. We even probably monitor the conversations of the English diplomats. So, you can pontificate that, it shouldn't happen, but it happens as a matter of life. So that's just not something I'm going to get upset about.
Okay. That's fair. So now I want to move on to more foreign policy, since we're touching on that. I want to talk briefly regarding the Syrian conflict and Assad. We sent weapons to the rebels in Syria who we knew were led by al-Qaeda jihadists. And it has now been reported that thousands of children have died at the hands of these terrorists in 2013 due to the fact that they had more weapons, which we sent them. How do you think Congress and the President should have handled this conflict?
There are some very difficult situations in the world. I'm going to change the subject again so you know where I'm going, and then I'll come back to Syria.
Okay.
I was actually running as a Libertarian for the United States Senate back in 2004 when we were talking about going into Iraq. And I said publicly as often as I could and as loudly as I could that if we put ground troops into Iraq without the full involvement and assistance of the world community, it would be the biggest mistake of my lifetime. And nothing has happened since that time to change my mind. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. And yes, he had mustard gassed or gassed some of the Kurds, and he was doing bad things to his people. But there's only so much the United States government, military, can do to keep bad things from happening around the world. Should we never use our troops? No, I won't say that. In some circumstances where, in Rwanda, where there's just simply a pogrom, where they're simply butchering people, I think any civilized nation or any civilized country has to step forward and keep that sort of thing from happening. But we must realize our limitations, and there's only so much we can do, and there's only so much we should do. Coming back to Syria, there's only so much we can do. Assad is a bad guy, also done bad things. We've forced him into a corner now, of course, and so this whole civil war is going on because we forced him into a corner. You can go back again, I'm much older than you, but in 1957, we encouraged the Hungarians to revolt against the Soviet Union, and then once they did, we didn't support them. Our government has made a lot of mistakes, and again, we simply must realize what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. And that's an old prayer, I won't recite it directly, but, God give me the grace to be able to understand what I can do to help and what I can't, and then to be comfortable with the first and understanding of the second. We can't do anything effectively in Syria. We should not be involved in Syria, and we should never have been involved because our giving of these weapons and everything has created these problems that now we're facing. Same thing happened in Afghanistan. We supported the supposed freedom fighters, and that included Osama bin Laden. We supported him. Then once they kicked the Soviets out, they had all these weapons. They're pretty radical dudes, and they continued to be radical. Surprised? We make mistakes, and mostly it's because of commission. We should make more of omission and understand that we're not the policemen of the world. We can't do it effectively. We can't afford it. It's inappropriate. And in a lot of ways, we are putting our own safety at risk and security because we're out there making people mad at us. So it's a blend.
Creating our own enemies, yes.
We are in Afghanistan. We're creating, and in Pakistan, we're creating more terrorists than we're killing or disposing by this drone program. We're caught. We're our own worst nightmare in that regard, and so many others. Iran, we went into Iran and installed the Shah. We overthrew the rightfully elected government of Iran. We don't do this. The answer is no. We don't do this.
Okay. Well, we've touched on a lot of issues today. And I have one last question for you, and then I'll give out some more information on the Libertarian Party of Arkansas, the state convention that's next week. How did you get involved with the Libertarian Party?
I just mentioned that with the passage of the so-called Patriot Act that I could no longer be a Republican. I literally remember the process. It took me about 13 seconds to decide that I'm a Libertarian. I will be a Libertarian for the rest of my life. I am financially responsible, and I am socially accepting. And that's where about 85% of the citizens in our country are. We are in the mainstream of United States political thought. And, when it comes, like Governor Johnson said recently, when it comes to our freedoms, I'm a flaming liberal. And people think that the Libertarians are much more closely aligned to Republicans because we're financially responsible, and that's true in that regard. But as far as our liberties are concerned, we're much more liberal than the Democratic Party. We believe our freedoms are critically important to our way of life. And so if you are going to be, again, surveilling me with drones or eavesdropping or going into my bedroom without a warrant, all that sort of stuff, we're Libertarians. We are definitely liberals, and that's where I am. And I expect that that's where most people are once they start thinking about it. If you allow Governor Johnson to be in the 3 presidential debates in 2016, it will be a revolution. It will require the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominees to actually address issues of all things, and we will be competitive, and then they will see that Governor Gary Johnson from New Mexico is far and away the most qualified person to be president. We simply must group together and encourage him to run again, and I will support him. I've already told him I'll support him in any way possible because he's the right guy. He doesn't have an ego. He's done it before. He was not only for what he says, and he says very good things, but he actually did them in his 8 years as governor of New Mexico, left the state with $1 billion surplus. He was a Republican governor, worked well with Democrats, worked well with the Native Americans, did good things, and he did them for the right reason. He is exactly the person that we need in Washington. Had he been elected in 2012, our country would be more prosperous, we'd be more free, we'd be more secure, and we'd be happier. And I don't mean to just flippantly say that. I deeply believe it. It's just a question of exposure. So I'm going to be in Little Rock next week, actually. Today is Saturday, so I'll be there a week from today. And we'll be talking about these things. I've actually written a book. It's called A Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems, and I'll bring a couple along to donate for an auction and sign them, and look forward to discussing real issues with good and caring and interested people. Can't wait to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity of sharing these thoughts, and I hope to be able to shake your hand next week when I'm there as well. Will you be there?
Well, Yes, I will. Yes, I will. And we will do a second interview, a follow-up.
Good.
I am excited. And, again, for the listeners, it is going to be at the Comfort Inn and Suites Hotel in downtown Little Rock. So that's 707 Interstate 30 at Little Rock, right off of 30 downtown. And it starts Friday at 6 p.m. and it goes until Sunday, February 23rd at 3 p.m. And, Judge Gray, I so appreciate you coming and giving me an hour of your time today, and I will see you next week.
Simply my pleasure. Good luck to us all. Life is good. Enjoy it when you have it, and we're blessed to be in this country, blessed to be able still to talk freely over the radio and to each other, but let's keep these freedoms secure and safeguard the soul of our country and bring back that excellence that I know we can bring back. So thank you. Look forward to it. In fact, I'll even give you a hug next week. How's that? See you then.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Take care. Good luck to us all.
You too.
See you next Saturday. Bye.
Thank you. And don't forget that sunshine.
You got it. Absolutely. Bring it with me.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Talk to you then. Bye.